used fat quarters to make this quilt. For the quilt in the demo, it finishes at 73 by 90, and I used 54 fat quarters. For each fat quarter, you'll have enough fabric to make 4 blocks. So with 54 fat quarters, I made 216 blocks, and I set them 18 across and 12 down. Now if you want to make a smaller quilt, you can choose 40 fat quarters and make approximately 65 by 70 quilt. And you'll still have 4 blocks per fat quarter, but you'll have 160 blocks, and you won't use quite all of them, and you can set them 17 across by 9 down. And you'll see for each fat quarter, we're going to make 2 cuts across. The first one will be 5 inches times 21 inches for the 4 triangles. And the second cut will be 10 inches times 21 inches, and we're going to subcut those into 12 1.5 by 10 inches. And you'll see that in the next, coming up in the next step. The tools I use to make the triangles quilt is a 60-degree triangle ruler and a deluxe corner trimmer. Now both of these happen to be from Marty Michelle. A lot of people make these equilateral triangle rulers. This is called a 60-degree triangle. Some call it a 60-degree pyramid. Some call it an equilateral triangle. And you need to have a ruler that will make finished 4.5-inch high triangles. And this one, typically you cut your strip at 5 inches and it makes a 4.5-inch high triangle. It's called an equilateral triangle because all the sides are the same measurements when you're finished. And the deluxe corner trimmer is not a necessity, but it really helps when you're piecing, and it helps you to get a lot of accuracy. The way we use the corner trimmer triangle is to cut blunt ends off of one or more sides, or one or more points of the triangle. And this corner trimmer has 6 different angles on here, and we're going to use the 60-degree angle marked here. And we line up these edges, and you'll see it has this little tip exposed, and you cut this tip off. This gives you the blunt edge, and you're going to use this when you're sewing the blocks into rows. Each fat quarter will be cut first into 2 strips, and then the strips will be cut into triangles or framing strips. If you look at the fat quarter, the selvage is on this side, and this is the lengthwise grain. This is the 18-inch measurement, and this is the 21-inch measurement. We're going to cut our strip. We're going to cut a 5-inch strip across the 21-inch length, and we're going to cut a 10-inch strip off the same 21-inch length. The 5-inch strip we're going to cut into For the 5-inch strip, we're going to cut it into 4 equilateral triangles using our triangle ruler. And for the 10-inch strip, we're going to cut 10 inches by 1.5-inch strips. We'll get 4 triangles from the 5-inch, and we'll cut 12 strips from the 10-inch. Here's what the fat quarter looks like when you've cut it. You'll have 4 triangles, and then you'll have 12 strips cut 10 inches by 1.5 inches. Stack up your strips all together, and then stack up your triangles, and you'll have all your strips and triangles stacked. Next, we'll sort them out for piecing. First thing I did was take a triangle and I laid it down, and then I looked for a fabric that would go with it. So I'll take this one, and there's 3 strips here, and I laid them on top of the triangle. So then I took another triangle, laid it on top, and looked for pieces to go here. So here are 3 pieces, and that goes on top. So I continued like this until all of my strips and triangles were stacked. Let's do one more. Some stacks have more than others right now because I'm still stacking. To sew your triangles together, you'll need your stack of triangles and you'll need a pair of small scissors at your sewing machine. You're going to use your 1/4-inch foot, and we'll take the top stack, the top triangle, and the top set of strips, and we set 2 of the strips aside. And you lay the strip down, and you take the blunt edge of the triangle. You go to the opposite side, and you're going to put this side, right sides together on your strip. And you just sort of eyeball it and center it. And you're going to sew 1/4 inch. Now what you're going to do next is turn it over where the strip is at the top, and you're going to finger press this towards the strip. And this is where the starch comes in handy. It helps you get a nice crisp edge. Now you take the next strip and lay it face up, and you're going to take the triangle and the strip that you stitched on it. You're going to lay it on the strip and sort of center it, and you can just eyeball it. And now you're going to stitch 1/4 inch. Now this seam that you just sewed, you're going to cut this waist of the strip, the previous strip, off. So you look for the line you just sewed and cut parallel to that line. And turn it over and then finger press. Then take your last strip and do the same thing and center it. Move it over and then sew. Then turn it over and finger press this edge as well. Oh, no, before you do that, you're going to go the line you just sewed, and you're going to cut off these 2 excess strips. So now you have a triangle. Now you finger press to the opposite side. I do a big stack of these, and then I go and press it again using starch again, and then we'll trim them later. Once your block is pieced, give it a good press, and now we're going to trim off this excess fabric from the strips. I like to use this rotating cutting mat. It just makes it easier to get all of the pieces. And I have this ruler, it's 6.5-inch ruler, but if you have a thinner ruler, like a 3-inch, as long as it's about 12 inches long, it'll work really good for this. Line up the edge of your ruler with the edge of one of these lines, and we're going to trim off this part right here. And then just rotate it to this other side and line up this straight edge here, and we're going to cut off these parts here. Need a new blade. So there's your finished block. And one thing I wanted to show you is on the back of this, since we cut with the lengthwise grain, you can tell which is the lengthwise grain two ways. You'll see this block here, this strip here. This was the first piece that was added, and you can tell because it has two seam lines going this way. None of the others have two seam lines going the same way or opposite directions. Also, if you turn it over, the blunt end that you cut off is right here, and that tells you that this is the lengthwise grain. That will come in handy when you're piecing your rows together. The next thing to do is to lay out all the blocks. Here are the blocks laid out on the design wall. And you'll notice the sides are zigzagged, or they're jagged edges, and those will be trimmed off later. And these top ones, the top two rows, have already been sewed together. And next I'll show you how to sew the rows together. And when I placed these, I didn't care too much about the placement because there are so many different fabrics. And I just made sure that the neighbors were not the same fabrics. When you have this stack of blocks all stacked for your row, we're going to start sewing them, and it helps if you have this Deluxe Corner Trimmer by Marnie Michelle, or anything that helps trim off the corners. This one has 5 or 6 different angles, and it has the nubbed off corner where you can cut it off, and we're going to use the 60-degree part. And I found that if I just hold it in my hand and put it up to the corner that I want to trim, and just put it like this and trim it with my scissors, it works. And you'll see it as we go along. This is the first one on the stack, and it has the pin in it to show that it's the very top on the left-hand block. And so we'll take the stack, and the stack is in order how I want them pieced. So this will be on the left, and then all the others will be put on to the right. What I want to do is keep the lengthwise grain going this way in the row. So as this is the lengthwise, and if this is the lengthwise, it goes like this. If you used an equilateral triangle or a pyramid ruler that had the blunt end, then you will have a blunt end on the back of your block. And this one's more easy to see. So here's the blunt end where it's cut off, and then here are the two pointy ends. So this again is the top of the first block. Here is the blunt end, so it's going this way. The second one, here is the blunt end, and it's going to go this way. So we still have the lengthwise grains facing this direction. For the first two blocks, you're going to simply turn them over and match the corners, or the points. And I use my needle down. So start with your needle down, and you're going to take a few stitches first, and then you're going to stop and line up your other corner, and then finish your stitching. Now I take this and finger press it toward the block we just stitched, the block that was on the top. So you just finger press this down, and this tells you that this is the block on the left hand side. It's really easy to get these confused if you don't have your little pin in there. And next I'm going to trim off this little nub here, and we take our next block and let's turn it over to find the blunt end. So here it is. So this is my lengthwise grain, and it goes like this. Now down here there's another nub here, so we're going to cut that nub off. This is where we want to make sure, let me turn this back around, we want to make sure that this lines up correctly so you'll get a good 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, and I'll show you how that works. So these two blocks are going together like this, and this is the corner that we want to make sure we match perfectly. So we're going to take this corner here and we're going to cut a blunt end on it. So we pick up the corner, we take the 60-degree mark, and I found it's easier to turn it over because I can hold it in my right hand and line it up here. So we line it up here and we're just going to cut this off. So now we have our blunt end just like that. And that goes down here. And we're going to start here at this end, line up the edges, take a few stitches, then line up the bottom and sew. Now we turn this and finger press it toward the block we just sewed, and I will show you what it looks like. First up here we'll cut off the nub, and then down here I'm going to turn it over so you can see it. You see this is a perfect, almost perfect 1/4 of an inch from this point to the edge. So that's what you want every time, because you're going to have one of these now from every time you sew on another block. So let's do another one. Find our blunt end. It's right here. And this block is going to go this way. And so here is where we need to cut off the blunt end. And we'll pick up this one and do it. Line up the 60-degree mark and cut it. Now you'll have these little nubs everywhere. Okay, now let's turn this over, line up the edge, and you see the blunt end gives you lines up perfectly across the top and the sides. Take a few stitches, stop with your needle down, and then line up this other edge, and line up the edges and go. And then finger press toward the block you just stitched. Cut off the nubs. The nub there. And so there again is your 1/4 of an inch, your point, and your 1/4 of an inch to the edge. So do that with the whole rest of the row. In this case I'm doing 18 blocks, and do those all the way down till you have your row. When you sew the rows together, this one and this one, you're going to try to match these points as best as you can. And if you use the deluxe corner trimmer when you piece the rows, this comes out pretty easy. So that's pretty easy to do. These points here I wasn't concerned with that much. But they did pretty well. So here's the other point you're concerned with. Once you press 2 rows together, I found it easier and it looked better if we press the seam open here. You're going to have one side that comes out, and the other side of this row, go on the other side, it goes like this, it sort of makes a V. What we're going to do now is trim both sides so there'll be a straight edge. Now you'll want a ruler that's about 18 inches long, so it'll cover the 2 rows together. What we want to do is take this point on this edge that has the V part and this point, and we're going to put the ruler with the 1/4 inch line right at the point, and then line it up with the other one at the bottom. So let me get closer. So we're lining up the 1/4 inch here and here, and we'll just lay it across and just look at the ruler and make sure that the ruler is straight. Check your ruler placement here and down here at the bottom. And once it's 1/4 of an inch away this side, we're going to trim it. So this is what this looks like. There is a way you can use your triangle ruler to just cut these pieces, but I thought it was easier to do it this way. Now I've turned this row around, these two rows around to the other side so it's facing me on this way. And you'll notice there's two 120-degree angles. There's one here and one here. And we want to make sure that we get our perfect 1/4 of an inch there too. So I'm going to mark it very lightly on the front. So to mark this one, we put the 120-degree angle lined up along this side and this side. This side and this side. And it should be, the little hole in the template should be right over that seam line. And I'm going to take a very fine pin and just put one little tiny dot right there that I can see when I'm piecing it. You can barely see it right there. And I'm going to do the same thing on this side. So where's my 120? And this I'll have to mark on the green side a little bit. Okay, and I'll be able to see that when I'm stitching the rows together. What you'll do next is you're going to use the 4 points, the two you marked on the outside, and then these 2 points here, and we're going to measure 1/4 of an inch off of there. So we'll start down here and lay our 1/4 of an inch over this marking, and lay the 1/4 of an inch over this point, and then over this point, and then check this one to make sure it's here too. So those are surprisingly came out right. Now we're going to cut. And then this is what that looks like. Now you have your straight edge. So continue sewing your rows together. Sew your rows together in pairs. Press the seam open, then trim the edges.